Stranger Things, the awesome mystery/Spielberg homage TV show that straddles the line between 80s nostalgia and 80s period piece.
The Demogorgon is tired of your silly human bickering!
Either way, it's rad as hell. What's both crazy and cool about Stranger Things is that each season builds a bigger world in and around Hawkins, Indiana. So the number of interesting characters continues to grow. But the question is always there. Who is the most good and who is the most evil? Today, we'll do our best to break it down. Full disclosure, spoilers ahead. Now let's jump into the Upside Down and take on Stranger Things, good to evil. As usual, we'll be starting with the good characters, the most pure, and working our way down. And the gold medal of good goes to Joyce, mother of Will and Jonathan, and all-around relentless hero, particularly in Season 1. She instinctively understands that her son has not been killed.
Whoever you found is not my boy.
Despite what those nefarious government scientists would have you believe. And she goes to nearly insane lengths to prove it. She even installs a light board/alphabet in her house to allow Will to communicate with her.
I will keep these lights up until the day I die!
Throughout the remaining seasons, she shows resilience in the face of the Mind Flayer's destructive tactics, working to understand how Will is communicating to her about how to fight the Mind Flayer, and she always listens. That's what's so great about Joyce. Not only is she an open and accepting mother, for example, she mentions that she knows that Will may be gay, but loves him all the same, and ultimately takes in 11 at the end of Season 3. But she also believes in her children. She doesn't dismiss them, she responds to them and is there for them. And that's why she's the best. All that in addition to being brave and fearless. Right behind Joyce is her son, Will. Will is a sweet kid who was thrust into a terrifying reality where he had to hide from a vicious demon, the Demogorgon.
I swear I'm gonna get you, okay?
Even while trapped, he still manages to use messages to not just help himself, but help others as well. Once he gets back out into the real world, he remains connected to the Upside Down, with a connection to the Mind Flayer. Even while possessed, he shows more resilience than any other individual who has been possessed by the Mind Flayer, working with his mother and Hopper to drive the Mind Flayer from his body. He's a brave soul, a great friend, and selfless to the end. Basically, a perfect 1980s young adventure hero, perfect for the genre. Now, where would we be without everyone's favorite gone too soon gal, Barb? Barb won our hearts, only to be devoured by the Demogorgon in the blink of an eye. She was a great friend who was Nancy's conscience, even when it was inconvenient.
He just wants to get in your pants.
For example, she agreed to chaperone her best friend even though she really didn't want to attend the party, which ultimately led to her being made fun of by Tommy H. and Carol, and then reflecting by the pool before she was killed. Barb, you'll forever remain in our hearts. We're gonna throw in Scott Clark next.
Anything is possible.
The science teacher who helps the boys search for Will, as well as assists with science projects.
Do you know anything about sensory deprivation tanks, specifically how to build one?
Really, Mr. Clark is likable, supportive, and friendly. He's resourceful and is a caring teacher without a doubt. This is shown by the fact that he's often the first one the kids go to when they need help with something. We need more teachers like him.
The Heath kid is all yours for the rest of the day.
And right behind is Bob, Joyce's new boyfriend.
I can't stop thinking about you. It's crazy. I feel like a teenager.
There is nothing bad to say about Bob. He's a great guy who supports Joyce and the kids however he can.
What do you say, big guy? You want to go for a ride in the Bobmobile?
He may not be the most clever individual. In fact, he inadvertently gets Will possessed by the Mind Flayer. But at the end of Season 2, however, Bob proves to be a sacrificial hero who volunteers to run into danger to help the gang survive.
As soon as I get those doors open,
I'm gonna get them out.
Ultimately being killed by a pack of demo dogs in the process. In Season 3, we see that Will has drawn Bob as his hero. Ours too, buddy. 11 has had a rough life. Kidnapped and forced into abusive experiments by a top-secret government laboratory, she ends up escaping and befriending a group of young kids who fully believe and support her. 11 has to navigate the difficulties of adolescence while reintegrating back into society.
You look pretty good.
She carries with her an overwhelming sense of obligation and duty both to her friends and love interest Mike, as well as her quest for the truth.
The bad man's gone. We'll be home soon.
Her love for her friends often causes her to put herself into moral peril through overuse of her powers in order to save them.
Bye, Mike.
Granted, her quest for truth and learning about her powers, along with her sense of independence, cause her to bump up against the confines imposed by her friends and father figure Hopper. But we can chalk all that up to being the only known teen with psychic powers.
Hey! 3-inch minimum.
11 is definitely totally good.
Time to go.
Right behind 11 is her father figure, Hopper. Hopper, the sheriff in Hawkins, functions almost as a lead in an old hard-boiled noir.
Mornings are for coffee and contemplation.
His big shtick through the series is his detective intuition, essentially his "this doesn't feel right" vibe. While not necessarily a character trait, his belief in Joyce helps them discover that the dead Will is a fake Will, which sets off the adventure that leads to Will's rescue.
Come on, kid. Come on, kid!
His sense of duty sometimes leads him to be overbearing, particularly with 11. But it becomes increasingly clear that his protective nature is due to his fear of losing 11. As he has lost others he has loved. In Season 3, we do see Hopper start to pull back from his morals in pursuit of protecting the kids, going rogue. And while I'm inclined to believe the showrunners added this to make Hopper feel edgier, it definitely puts a little ding against him.
Oh, he just bumped his head. Just a little boo-boo, right, Larry?
His brutal conversation with Mike marks perhaps the low point in his morality, though Mike did have it coming. But we're not convinced this relationship will remain on such tense terms.
There's something very wrong with this thing.
Still, through Season 3, who knows what's going on in Season 4, Hopper definitely demonstrates he's an upstanding guy.
What the hell?
Now we have Mike. Mike is a bit of a Hopper and a bit of a Joyce.
He's a spy. If he knows where we are, so does the Shadow
He's
Monster.
lying!
He's all about protecting and saving the ones that he loves.
We can help look.
Honestly, that seems to be a pretty heavy through line for most of these characters. Still, he cares deeply about Will and cares deeply, scratch that, loves 11.
I never gave up on you.
He's a great kid who stands up for the little guy and never treats them as anything less than amazing.
We can't take any chances. We need to assume the worst.
He does, however, in Season 3, get into a nasty bout with Hopper after he and 11 disrespect Hopper's rules of the house.
Not if you understand.
It more or less puts the fear of God in Mike, though I'm not sure the fear equates to morality.
You want to see real crazy?
It remains to be seen how Mike will play out, though I'm inclined to believe it'll be more of the good.
I love you too.
Following Mike, we have Nancy. Nancy is incredibly intelligent, although she certainly becomes more rebellious after entering a relationship with Steve. But even then, she remains kind and compassionate. It's also revealed that she's quite brave, especially for those she cares about. For example, when Barb went missing, she entered a portal to another dimension to save her. That takes courage. She also used her and Jonathan's blood to lure out the monster later on. Again, big courage points.
Up next, we have Dustin. Dustin is a less complicated, though 1,000 times more hilarious member of the gang.
What the hell?
We don't get to see him have as many conflicted moments as Mike and 11 do, which might lend itself to being posted higher on the list. The flip side of that is we don't get to see many instances of his morals being put to the test. Sure, Dustin has amazing and hilarious scenes with Steve, and he goes through with elaborate plans to defeat those dangerous commies.
Bald Eagle, I repeat, this is Scoop Troop. Do you copy?
Yes, I copy.
Yes, he does raise a demodog, which ends up setting off a chain reaction of disaster in Season 2, and yes, he does save the day with the best and most surprising rendition of the never-ending story, with his Suzie Poo, Chills. But Justin is the comic relief. He's good, but he's not a moral masterpiece. Behind Dustin is a more dynamic character who has had probably the biggest turnaround in the entire show, Steve.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this'll do.
Going from major a-hole who viciously bullied Jonathan to being a surrogate father to the kids in Seasons 2 and 3, Steve really grows into his own.
Henderson,
He's back!
He more or less has responsibility thrust upon him, but takes it like a very responsible young adult,
Out of the way! You want some?
fighting with his very life to save the kids from the Demodogs, as well as helping save the town from the Russians in Season 3. While we have to ding him for his a-hole behavior in Season 1, he's the turnaround story of the show. On to Lucas, another member of the gang. He's not granted the same amount of screen time as the other characters. This show has a huge cast, but his own maturity and respect, particularly when it comes to dating, is admirable, especially compared to Mike's more angsty ways.
Do you lie?
What? No. Friends don't lie.
His intellect and knack with improvised weapons always come in handy in fights against the monsters of Hawkins, and he's always willing to throw himself into harm's way. Definitely a good guy. After Lucas, we have Jonathan, Will's older brother.
You can talk to me. You know that, right? Whatever happened.
He's a great guy who's always looking out for his younger brother, being supportive of his mother and her new relationship with Bob, and working with Nancy to expose the secrets of Hawkins.
I just think there's something really wrong with this rap.
His relationship with Nancy gets strained as he's forced to choose between his girlfriend's idealism and his need for a job.
I told you over and over to drop this story.
Still, at the end of the day, he ultimately returns to be an integral part of saving the town and his family, and that lands him firmly in the good. Next up is Max.
Nobody calls me Maxine. It's Max.
Younger stepsister of Mean Billy. Max has to struggle with placating her older stepbrother while also getting out from under his and her cruel stepfather's yoke.
No, it's not okay. Nothing about his behavior is okay.
She's a kind-hearted soul who develops some serious grit to survive such an inhospitable household. Like all the other elements of the gang, she puts her own safety second in order to help save the town and her friends.
You're gonna kill him, aren't you?
The eccentric Murray gets thrown in next.
And if you need to reach me again, don't.
With a history of being ignored by others due to his strange reports, he's kind of disgraced by most people.
Got any proof on your butt probing aliens yet, Murray?
That said, he's someone who sticks to his beliefs. Definitely weird though. He has a habit of picking up on romantic tension and calling people out on it. For example, Hopper and Joyce for ignoring their feelings.
Get to the part where you admit your sexual feelings for one another.
But he also helped them and the kids close the portal to the Upside Down underneath the Starcourt Mall.
Scoops Troop, this is, Bald Eagle.
We'll quickly throw in Terry Ives here as well.
Breathe. Sunflower. Rainbow.
Without getting too deep into her backstory, she willingly allowed herself to be experimented on, but she didn't know that she was pregnant at the time.
She didn't know she was pregnant at the time.
This ultimately caused the mess of her daughter being tortured by Brenner, as well as her tragic backstory.
450.
She ends up capping a guard, but we can't really hold it against her too much, all things considered.
Stay back. Stay back.
And wrapping up the good characters, a fun Season 3 addition, Robin, is the deadpan ice cream sales associate opposite Steve.
You know that means you suck.
Her contributions to the team's takedown of the Russians and the Mind Flayer definitely allows her to round out that good area. And with that said, that ends our list of overall good characters. Now we enter the murkier waters. This is the gray area. Alright, we're gonna throw in the awkward, Cheeto-loving Keith next.
And keep things PG in here, right?
He knows the boys and they often throw insults at each other, but it's usually in a pretty innocent, childish way.
Acne isn't a rash and it isn't contagious, you prepubescent waste away.
Maybe a bit creepy with his tactics to get Mike to set him up with a date with Nancy, but he's pretty harmless. Moving on, we have Erica. Yes, I know that Erica helps the cause, but we're gonna rank her as not quite a good character.
And with all due respect, you do what this man tells you, you're all gonna die.
She's a wisecracker and a haggler who always wants to know what's in it for me.
I still haven't heard what's in this for Erica.
Certainly, she knows that a lot of things going on are bad, but she's happy to capitalize upon any situation. And that's why she's in the gray area.
Commence operation child endangerment.
Now let's talk about Karen Wheeler. Not happy with her marriage, Karen begins flirting with Billy.
I just don't think that you've had the right teacher.
She almost cheats on her husband with him. However, she doesn't when she's reminded that Ted does care about their family. She's a bit of a stereotypical overbearing mother, but she does love her kids.
And you expect me to remain but calm?
After Erica, we have Alexei, the escaped Russian who was forced to work in the secret Russian lab beneath Hawkins. Yes, he was forced to do the work, but the guy worked to complete a portal between worlds that unleashed monsters. And he was working for the Soviets on American soil. And this is the 80s, so that is not cool. We won't say that he's evil, but I don't think that we could truly call him good either.
Yes, machine.
Vroom vroom.
In the more bad than not territory, but not really evil, we get to Billy. Let's be blunt, Billy is an a-hole.
You're late again and you're skating home.
He tries to run over the kids in his car, blows up at Max for seeing Lucas, breaks Max's skateboard, and is an overall terror.
You stay away from him, you hear me? Stay away.
We do quickly find out that a lot of this stems from his father's physical abuse, and in season 3, Billy is ultimately able to find redemption. After he gets compromised by the Mind Flayer, he goes through a very dark period, where he stalks and attacks young women for the Mind Flayer to invade, helping the Mind Flayer grow an army of citizens.
Don't be afraid. It'll be over soon.
While we can't pin this on Billy's wants, he only gets possessed because he was on the way to have sex with a married woman, which might be frowned upon. But his being possessed is far more violent than the other possessed victims, possibly suggesting that the Mind Flayer is amping Billy's naturally vicious tendencies.
Just try and stay very still.
But he does finally regain lucidity and sacrifices himself to save his sister. Perhaps his only redeeming grace, but a big one nonetheless.
Sorry.
And this is what keeps him from falling into the overall bad territory. And with that said, this ends the gray area. We're now firmly in the bad and evil. And the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We're now at Billy's dad, Neil. In many ways, he's responsible for how Billy is. He's abusive, both physically and verbally, and seems to enjoy making his son scared.
Respect and responsibility. That is right.
In addition to being threatening and abusive, he also comes off as someone who enjoys causing harm towards his son.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry I couldn't hear you.
Below Neil is Mayor Klein.
Flash your little gold badge. Get rid of them.
The mayor who sold his city out to the Russians. Again, not cool. He works with the Russians to help them develop a secret underground lair underneath the Starcourt Mall, and then works with a Russian assassin to try and kill Hopper and Joyce.
My friend almost killed me last night, so I'd say we're still not even.
Not to mention his mall threatened the local businesses he represented.
They lost their jobs to the mall and blamed me for helping make that happen.
A scummy guy all the way around. But going back to crappy dads, we can't forget about Will's father, Lonnie. A total scumbag.
Boy never was very good at taking care of himself.
Aside from forcing Jonathan to kill a rabbit when he was 10, and being all around negligent and verbally abusive.
My dad took me hunting on my birthday. Made me kill a rabbit.
Lonnie also showed up in town after a body, believed to be Will's, was found. But not to attend the funeral, but to collect a settlement by the company that owned the quarry, where it was believed that Will drowned.
You weren't here because of Will. You never cared about him. You never did.
Lonnie is nothing less than despicable. Not far from Mayor Klein is Grigory, the Russian assassin who kills Alexei. He's a cold-blooded killer who hunts Joyce and Hopper over the course of season 3 at the orders of his employer.
Joyce! Drop!
He's not a thinker, he never wants vengeance, he kills because he's ordered to. Killing is just a paycheck for him. Evil without remorse. But more evil, though, is the employer, Stepanov. Another cold, ruthless Russian who is willing to execute anyone who stands in the way of his ultimate goal, opening the portal between worlds. We don't ever gain much insight into his character, but what little we see gives us no room for doubt. Definitely an evil guy. Moving on to Dr. Brenner, the mad scientist who experimented on a college woman named Terry Ives in 1970. She became pregnant, and Dr. Brenner abducted her baby upon birth.
Who's there? Who was there? He took her.
The baby, now referred to as 11, became his pet project for testing out telekinetic powers.
I want you to listen to what he says and repeat his words back to me.
Through his testing, he ripped open a portal into the Upside Down, which ended up unleashing a Demogorgon, getting Will kidnapped, killing Barb, and eventually bringing over the attack from the Mind Flayer. This guy is trouble. He never showed any remorse for his actions. He never had any empathy for those he hurt. Honestly, he's truly one of the worst characters on the show and fully deserving of the title Evil.
And eventually, it will kill you.
Now, before we reveal our most evil pick, we'd like to give a shout out to the Demogorgon. We decided to not put the Demogorgon on the list because it is unclear how much of a level of self-awareness the creature possesses. It certainly is a predator and it preys on humans, but plenty of animals hunt other animals. That alone doesn't make it evil. We will say that it's definitely the scariest character on the show. Truly, the thrills of season 1 can't be beat. But finally, the most evil, obviously, is the Mind Flayer. The Mind Flayer is the highly powerful entity in the Upside Down. It exists as a nebulous, tentacled cloud being that can summon and control demogorgons, demodogs, and other vicious creatures. It certainly can plan, direct, control, attack, and cause suffering, all on purpose. Its motivation seems to be to simply end everyone, and it attempts to do this by first possessing Will, then, when that doesn't work, by creating an army of the Flayed to wipe out Eleven and the rest of those who stand in his way.
I'm here for you, Nancy Drew.
It's not unfeeling like Dr. Brenner, it's simply a being of evil, suffering, and death. It wants to erase humanity's individuality and turn them into tools to further its agenda. He's a being of pure evil energy. How could he be anything less than the most evil on our list? But what do you think? Who's the most evil character in Stranger Things? Let us know in the comment section below. Hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite shows. But most importantly, stay wicked.